Voltaire. Chapter 1. Paris Beginnings. Paris, the city of lights, the city of love, the city where my story begins. My name is François-Marie Arouet, but everyone calls me Voltaire. I was born in Paris, a grand city in France, in the year 1694. Paris was a bustling place. Even back then, imagine streets filled with horse-drawn carriages and people hurrying about their day. Tall buildings lined the avenues, and shops spilled their wares onto the sidewalks. There was always something to see, someone new to meet. My family lived in a comfortable house, not grand, but full of warmth. My father, a kind man with a twinkle in his eye, worked as a notary. A notary, you see, is someone who helps people with important documents, making sure everything is legal and proper. My mother, with a smile that could light up a room, was a wonderful storyteller. She filled my childhood with tales of brave heroes, cunning animals, and faraway lands. Books were my greatest treasure. My father had a wonderful study filled with them, floor to ceiling. The smell of old paper and leather filled the room, and I would spend hours lost in their pages. Stories of knights battling dragons, princesses trapped in towers, and wise old wizards solving mysteries took me on incredible adventures. I learned to read at a young age, and from that moment, there was no stopping me. Every free moment was spent devouring books, each one opening a new door to knowledge and imagination. The school was another exciting adventure. When I was old enough, I went to a prestigious school called College Louis Le Grand. It was a big change from the comfort of my home. Here, there were many students, all buzzing with energy and chatter. The teachers were strict but fair, and they pushed us to learn all we could. But the best part? The school had a fantastic library, even bigger than my father's study. Here, I discovered plays, poems, and histories that opened my mind to new ideas. I learned about ancient Greece and Rome, about brave explorers who sailed the uncharted seas, and about philosophers who pondered the meaning of life. Making friends was another great part of school. I met boys who shared my love for books and learning. We would spend hours discussing stories, arguing about ideas, and dreaming about what the future might hold. These friendships would last for many years, a constant source of support and encouragement. Life in Paris, with its bustling streets, cozy home, and endless books to explore, was a wonderful way to grow up. Little did I know, the seeds of curiosity and a love for words planted during these early years would blossom into a life filled with writing, adventure, and maybe even a little bit of trouble. Chapter 2. Early Writings. As I grew older, the stories and ideas I devoured in books started bubbling up inside me. Words danced in my head, begging to be set free. I couldn't hold them back any longer. Writing became my passion, a way to express the thoughts swirling inside me. I started small, crafting poems that tickled the funny bone and plays that poked fun at everyday life. My characters spoke in witty rhymes and silly voices, making people laugh while also leaving them with something to think about. My teachers, impressed by my talent, encouraged me to write more. Their praise fueled my desire to become a true writer. One day, a stroke of amazing luck came my way. A famous actress named Madame du Châtelet saw one of my plays. She wasn't just any actress, mind you. She was brilliant, witty, and a champion of new ideas. Imagine my surprise when she not only liked my play, but also invited me to live in her grand house. It was like stepping into a storybook. Her home was a haven for artists, thinkers, and anyone who dared to question the way things were. Living with Madame du Châtelet was life-changing. She became a close friend and a wise mentor. We spent hours discussing philosophy, science, and of course, writing. She challenged me to think critically and question everything. Don't just accept things because someone in a fancy hat says so, she'd say with a twinkle in her eye. Use your reason, Voltaire. Think for yourself. These conversations opened my eyes to a whole new world of ideas. We talked about fairness, where everyone gets a fair chance, and freedom, where people have the right to speak their minds. We debated ideas about religion and the power of reason. These discussions would become the foundation of everything I would write in the years to come. Living in such a stimulating environment fueled my writing even more. I started writing with a new purpose, not just to make people laugh, but to make them think. My plays became sharper, my poems more pointed. I used satire, which is a fancy way of saying using humor to make fun of something, to poke holes in outdated ideas and challenge authority. Of course, not everyone appreciated my writing. Some people in power, especially those in the church, felt threatened by my ideas. They believed I was disrespecting religion and questioning their authority. Back then, that was a serious matter. One of my plays, filled with clever jokes about a powerful nobleman, landed me in hot water. He was not happy, to say the least. His anger landed me in jail. Jail was a dark and scary place, not somewhere you'd want to spend your days. But even there, my love for words wouldn't be silenced. I used scraps of paper and anything I could find to write down my thoughts. Poems about hope, stories of brave heroes, and even some sharp critiques of the prison conditions. Let's just say it wasn't exactly a 5-star hotel, filled the lonely hours. After a few months, I was finally released. The experience left a mark on me, but it also showed me the power of words. They could get you into trouble, yes, but they could also be a force for good. I knew from that moment on that I would continue to write, even if it meant facing some challenges along the way. Chapter 3: Trouble in Paris. Freedom felt sweet after the dark walls of the jail, but the experience left a bitter taste in my mouth. Paris no longer seemed like the carefree city of my childhood. There was a shadow of fear lurking around every corner, a constant reminder that my words could bring trouble. However, giving up writing was never an option. Stories still swirled in my head. Characters demanded to be heard, and ideas begged to be explored. So, I adapted. I learned to write with a bit more caution, using wit and humor to disguise my criticisms. I wrote stories filled with adventure and hidden messages, novels that entertained while making people think. Thankfully, these works became bestsellers, read by people from all walks of life. Even those in power couldn't resist a good story, even if they didn't always agree with the subtle jabs I included. One of my most famous books from this time was Candide. It was a story about a young man named Candide who travels the world, encountering war, greed, and religious intolerance. Through Candide's innocent eyes, I poked fun at the absurdity of these things, hoping readers would see the world in a new light. Despite my efforts at disguise, trouble still seemed to find me. Some people, especially those who clung to old ways of thinking, remained suspicious of my work. They used their influence to silence me, whispering accusations and spreading rumors. The pressure mounted, and I knew it was only a matter of time before something serious happened. One day, a knock on my door shattered the morning peace. Officials from the government stood there, their faces grim. They informed me that my writings were deemed dangerous and that I was being exiled from Paris. Exile meant being banished from the city, forced to live in a remote location. The thought of leaving my friends, my work, and the life I had built was devastating. But there was no choice. With a heavy heart, I packed my bags and said goodbye to the city that had been both my muse and my prison. They sent me to a quiet town far away, a place where my words wouldn't cause any trouble. Yet, even in exile, my spirit remained unbroken. The pen, I realized, was a powerful tool, and I wouldn't let anyone take it away from me. Life in exile was a different kind of adventure. The bustling streets of Paris were replaced by rolling hills and sleepy villages. The constant hum of conversation gave way to the chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves. At first, the isolation felt suffocating, but as time passed, I found a new rhythm in this quieter life. The beauty of nature became a source of inspiration. I spent hours walking in the countryside, observing the world around me. The changing seasons, the lives of animals, and the simple beauty of a flower blooming in the spring all found their way into my writing. More importantly, exile gave me time to reflect. I re-evaluated my work, considering new ways to express my ideas without attracting unwanted attention. I started exploring different writing styles, delving into essays and philosophical works that tackled complex issues in a clear and concise way. Perhaps, I thought, by using reason and logic, I could reach a wider audience, even those hesitant to embrace my earlier, more satirical works. Exile, though forced upon me, became a turning point. It allowed me to refine my skills, explore new ideas, and prepare for the battles to come. Chapter 4. Across the Channel, a land of new ideas. Exile, as harsh as it felt, wasn't the end of my story. After a period of adjustment, a spark of curiosity flickered within me. News from across the English Channel, a body of water separating France from England, whispered of a different kind of place. England, they said, was a land where people were more open to expressing their ideas, a place where freedom of thought was valued. The idea of living in such a country was enticing. Perhaps, I thought, England could be the fresh start I needed. With a mix of hope and trepidation, I decided to take a chance. Saying goodbye to the quiet countryside of exile, I boarded a ship bound for England. The journey across the English Channel was long and rough. The small wooden boat tossed and turned with the waves, making my stomach churn. But the thought of a new beginning kept my spirits high. Finally, after days at sea, the white cliffs of Dover, England's dramatic coastline, came into view. It was a sight that filled me with a sense of possibility. Landing in London, England's bustling capital city, was like stepping into a new world. The streets were alive with activity, filled with people from all walks of life. Horse-drawn carriages clattered over cobblestones, vendors hawked their wares in loud voices, and the air buzzed with conversation. There was a sense of energy and openness that I hadn't felt since my childhood days in Paris. One of the first things that struck me was the abundance of coffee houses. These weren't just places to get a drink. They were hubs of intellectual discussion. Writers, philosophers, and scientists gathered here, sipping coffee and debating everything from the latest scientific discoveries to the meaning of life. These lively conversations were like a feast for my mind. I quickly found myself drawn into this intellectual circle. My reputation as a writer in France preceded me, and I was welcomed with open arms. Here, I could discuss my ideas freely, without fear of persecution. English thinkers, unlike some in France, valued reason and logic above blind obedience. They challenged my assumptions and exposed me to new ways of thinking. England wasn't perfect, of course. There were still social inequalities and political struggles, but there was a sense of progress in the air, a willingness to question the status quo. This spirit of change resonated deeply with me, and it fueled my writing even further. One of the most important things I learned in England was about democracy. Democracy is a system of government where people have a say in how things are run. While England wasn't a perfect democracy yet, the idea of giving people a voice in their own destiny fascinated me. I started incorporating ideas of fairness and justice into my writing, advocating for a world where everyone had an equal chance to succeed. Another concept that resonated with me was tolerance. Tolerance means respecting people's beliefs, even if you disagree with them. In England, people of different religions and backgrounds lived side by side, a stark contrast to the religious intolerance I had witnessed in France. This openness to diversity became a theme in many of my future works. Living in England wasn't just about intellectual stimulation. It was about making new friends. I met fellow writers who shared my passion for words and ideas. We formed a close-knit community, supporting each other through creative struggles and celebrating each other's successes. These friendships provided a sense of belonging that I had missed during my exile. After a few years in England, I started to feel a pull back towards France. The country of my birth still held a special place in my heart, but the time I spent in England left an indelible mark on me. It opened my eyes to new ways of thinking, exposed me to the power of reason and tolerance, and fueled my desire to fight for a better world. As I prepared to return to France, I knew I wasn't just going back as a writer. I was going back as a changed person, armed with new ideas and a renewed sense of purpose. Chapter 5. The Power of the Pen. Returning to France after years in England was like revisiting an old friend. The cobblestone streets, the charming cafes, and the lively chatter in the marketplace felt familiar yet different. Newspapers hinted at a changing atmosphere. People seemed more open to discussing ideas, and whispers of reform filled the air. Perhaps, I thought, the time was right to return to the world of writing. However, I knew I couldn't just pick up where I left off. Those in power who disliked my work were still around, and I needed to be more cautious. So, I began to write in a new way. Instead of direct attacks, I used stories, novels, and essays that disguised my message with humor and adventure. Think of it like wrapping a healthy vegetable in a delicious candy wrapper. People would enjoy the story, but they would also get a dose of something good for them along the way. These new works, filled with wit and satire, became bestsellers. People loved the clever characters, the exciting plots, and the hidden messages I weaved into the stories. Even those who might have disagreed with my ideas found themselves entertained by my writing. The power of the pen, I realized, wasn't just about blunt criticism. It was about making people think for themselves through clever storytelling. One of my most famous books during this time was Candide. Remember, I mentioned it before? This story followed a young man named Candide on a wild journey through war, greed, and religious hypocrisy. It was a funny and thought-provoking tale that made people question the world around them. Through Candide's innocent eyes, I shone a light on the absurdity of some human behaviors, hoping readers would see the need for change. Another important book was a collection of essays titled Philosophical Dictionary. Here, I tackled complex ideas like freedom, justice, and tolerance, using clear language and witty anecdotes to make them accessible to everyone. These essays sparked lively discussions in coffee houses and book clubs, slowly chipping away at old ways of thinking. My writing wasn't just about entertaining. It was about challenging the status quo. I believed that reason and education could solve many of the world's problems. Through my stories and essays, I encouraged people to think critically about the world around them, to question authority, and to fight for a more just and enlightened society. Of course, some people weren't happy with my message. Those who clung to power and tradition felt threatened by my ideas. They used their influence to silence me, spreading rumors and trying to discredit my work. But by now, I was a seasoned writer, and I wouldn't be easily discouraged. One tactic I used was anonymity. Sometimes, I published my works under fake names, making it harder for authorities to track me down. It wasn't the most ideal situation, but it allowed me to get my message out without facing immediate consequences. Another strategy was using satire. Remember, satire is using humor to make fun of something. By poking fun at the flaws of society in a funny way, I could get my point across without being too obvious. People would laugh, but hopefully, they would also think about the underlying message. Despite the challenges, I continued to write. I believed that the power of the pen was a force for good, and I wouldn't let anyone take that away from me. My words, disguised in humor and adventure, spread like seeds, taking root in people's minds and slowly paving the way for a more just and enlightened future. Chapter 6: Trouble Returns. Years passed, filled with the satisfying rhythm of writing and the joy of seeing my work reach a wider audience. People from all over France, and even beyond, were reading my stories and essays. It felt like my words were slowly chipping away at the walls of ignorance and injustice. But trouble, like an unwelcome guest, always seemed to find its way back to me. Some powerful figures, especially those in the church, remained suspicious of my ideas. They felt threatened by my questioning of authority and my promotion of reason above blind faith. One day, rumor reached my ears, sending a shiver down my spine. Apparently, a powerful nobleman, whose name I dare not mention here, was not a fan of my latest book. In this story, I had cleverly used satire to expose the greed and hypocrisy of some people in high positions. Let's just say the nobleman didn't see the humor in it. Using his influence, the nobleman started a campaign against me. He spread lies about my loyalty to France, accused me of disrespecting religion, and even hinted at connections to foreign enemies. It was all a big web of falsehoods, but it was enough to cause a stir. Suddenly, the air around me felt thick with danger. Friends warned me to be careful. Whispers of arrest followed me like a shadow, and even the friendly banter in cafes seemed to be laced with suspicion. My comfortable life, built on the power of words, started to crumble around me. Knowing I had to act fast, I decided to leave Paris for a while. The thought of exile again filled me with a sense of dread, but it seemed the only way to avoid a worse fate. With a heavy heart, I said goodbye to my friends and packed my bags. This time, I wouldn't be venturing across the sea to England. Instead, I sought refuge in a remote part of France, a place far from the watchful eyes of the authorities. Life in exile, though unwanted, wasn't all bad. The quiet countryside offered a sense of peace and a chance to reflect. The beauty of nature, from the majestic mountains to the delicate wildflowers, became a source of inspiration. My time away from the city lights also allowed me to focus on my writing, delving deeper into philosophical ideas and exploring new literary styles. However, the feeling of being a hunted man was never far away. I knew I couldn't stay hidden forever. My voice, my pen, was too important to me. I had a message to share, and I wouldn't let fear silence me. So, while in exile, I began to plot my return. I wouldn't return as a fugitive. I would return as a voice that could no longer be ignored. The time for hiding was over. It was time to face my adversaries and continue the fight for a better world, one word at a time. Chapter 7. A Return to Society. Years of exile stretched before me like a long, winding road. Away from the bustling streets of Paris, the quiet countryside offered a different kind of adventure. The chirping of birds replaced the cacophony of city life, and the whispering wind carried the scent of wildflowers instead of chimney smoke. While the initial peace was welcome, it couldn't erase the yearning for a return to society, to the world of ideas and debate. News from Paris, though slow to reach me, hinted at a shift in the winds. Whispers spoke of a younger generation, more receptive to new ideas, and a growing spirit of reform. Perhaps, I thought, the time was ripe for a comeback. But it wouldn't be a reckless return. It would be a calculated step back into the fray. With a measured approach, I started testing the waters. I cautiously sent some of my latest writings to trusted friends in Paris. These works, honed during my exile and filled with even more wit and subtlety, addressed the issues that plagued society: inequality, religious intolerance, and the misuse of power. My friends, after reading them, relayed a sense of excitement. People were hungry for change, and my words seemed to resonate with their desires. Emboldened by this response, I decided to make a covert return to Paris. It wasn't a triumphant parade. It was a calculated move under the cloak of anonymity. The city had changed in my absence. Coffee shops buzzed with lively discussions, bookstores overflowed with new ideas, and a sense of intellectual curiosity seemed to permeate the air. This atmosphere, so different from the one I had left behind, filled me with hope. The anonymity I craved came in the form of a pseudonym, a fake name. Under this new identity, I started attending gatherings in coffee houses and book clubs. Here, disguised as a curious observer, I listened to people debate my work. It was a strange experience, hearing my ideas dissected and discussed, all while keeping my true identity a secret. But anonymity wasn't my ultimate goal. I yearned to be a part of these discussions, to engage in the intellectual battles I had missed during exile. So, I started contributing cautiously, offering witty comments and thought-provoking questions under my assumed name. Slowly, I built a reputation as a sharp thinker, someone who could challenge assumptions with a well-placed joke. One day, during a particularly heated discussion about a recent political scandal, I couldn't hold back any longer. The hypocrisy of the situation burned within me. With a voice clear and strong, I dissected the issue, exposing the absurdity of it all with a touch of humor. The room fell silent, then erupted in applause. The mask had slipped, but for a good reason. My true identity was revealed, not with fear, but with respect. News of my return spread like wildfire. People were eager to meet the writer whose words had challenged them, entertained them, and ignited a spark of rebellion in their minds. I became a respected figure, a voice for reason and justice. Invitations to salons, gatherings of intellectuals, poured in. Finally, I had a platform to share my ideas without fear of immediate reprisal. However, the fight was far from over. Those who clung to power and tradition remained wary of my influence. They used their positions to try and discredit me, spreading rumors and launching veiled attacks in newspapers. But this time, I had the backing of the people. My ideas resonated with a growing segment of society who yearned for a more just and enlightened world. Through my writings, I continued to push for reforms, for a society where everyone had a voice and a chance to succeed. I used satire to expose the flaws of the system, essays to promote reason and logic, and stories to inspire hope for a better future. My words, once whispered in exile, now echoed through the streets of Paris and beyond, reaching ears hungry for change. Life, after years of exile and struggle, had come full circle. I was no longer just a writer. I was a symbol of hope, a voice for a generation that dared to dream of a brighter tomorrow. The power of the pen, I realized once again, could be a powerful weapon for change. One word, one story, one satirical jab at a time. Chapter 8. The Legacy of Words. As the years rolled by, my hair turned from a youthful brown to a distinguished white. Wrinkles etched their way onto my face, a roadmap of a life filled with adventure, challenges, and the constant dance with words. Yet, the fire in my eyes never truly dimmed. Writing remained my passion, my way of leaving a mark on the world. My fame spread far beyond the borders of France. People from all over Europe read my works, translated into different languages. My stories sparked conversations, ignited debates, and challenged long-held beliefs. The letters I received, filled with questions, praise, and even some criticism, were a constant reminder of the impact my words were having. But writing wasn't just about personal satisfaction. It was about inspiring others. Young writers contacted me, eager to learn and fight for a better world. These connections filled me with immense joy. To know that my words were lighting a fire in the hearts of future generations was a legacy I could be proud of. Of course, challenges continued to arise. Even in my golden years, some figures in power remained wary of my influence. They saw my ideas as a threat to the established order, but I never stopped writing, never stopped using my wit and reason to challenge the status quo. One of my most enduring legacies is the fight for freedom of expression. The idea that people should be able to speak their minds freely, without fear of punishment, was a cause I championed throughout my life. Through my writings, I argued for tolerance and understanding, for the right of people to hold different beliefs without facing persecution. Another important legacy is the value of reason. In a world often ruled by tradition and blind faith, I promoted the use of logic and critical thinking. I encouraged people to question everything, to analyze information before accepting it as truth. This emphasis on reason continues to be a cornerstone of modern thought. Finally, my stories, filled with adventure and humor, instilled a love of reading in countless people. I opened doors to new worlds, ignited imaginations, and showed the power of words to entertain and educate. Perhaps, in a way, these stories are my greatest legacy, for they continue to inspire readers of all ages, even today. In the year 1778, at the ripe old age of 83, I finally closed my eyes for the last time. But my words lived on. My stories, essays, and philosophies became classics, studied and discussed by generations to come. My voice, once a lone whisper in the wind, became a chorus for change, echoing through the halls of history.